Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you the ultimate guide on how to impress anyone that you meet. So have you ever wondered what separates people? What separates people that you meet and you just forget about versus someone that you meet and you remember them for weeks to come, you want to hang out with them, and you just want to be around them all the time? Well, that's the question that this video hopes to answer, because it all comes down to leaving a lasting impression and genuinely impressing others. Now, as a magician, it is literally my job to go up to people I've never met and impress them, and I've been fortunate enough to do this thousands of times to pretty much everyone from celebrities at red carpet events to self-made billionaires and to my friends at the bar, which is probably the most fun because there's very little pressure. And I'm super grateful for all those experiences. I'm not mentioning them to try and boast or anything like that, but I just want to let you know that what I'm about to tell you actually comes from thousands of real world experiences and things that I've had to learn from trying to impress some of the most successful people on this planet. So let's go to tip number one. All right, so the first secret to impressing anyone is to show a genuine interest in other people. So there's this amazing book out there called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I'm sure a lot of you watching this have read it or at least heard of it. And in that book, he says a very powerful quote. He says, "You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you." And for me, this was really life-changing advice, because what he's basically saying here is that we as human beings are naturally very self-centered creatures. And a good example of this that I always love to bring up when I'm talking about this topic is, think of the last time you were tagged in a group photo on Instagram or Facebook. Who was the first person you looked for? It was probably yourself, right? You want to make sure that your hair's looking fine, that your skin's looking smooth, that your smile is all good, or whatever it is. And that's all totally cool. But the point here is that we're naturally self-interested people. And this is where this tip really comes in, because as soon as you realize that people just really care about themselves and what they have to say and how they look and that they're the center of attention, and you show a genuine interest in all of that, it makes them feel appreciated, it makes them feel seen, and you instantly become someone that these people want to hang out with. So I know this sounds really obvious, like, oh yeah, be interested in people. But the point here is that most people don't consciously do this. And I do this all the time in magic. So before I even bring out a deck of cards at a gig, I just get to know the audience. I ask them questions about themselves and their background, and this just helps build a strong connection and leaves a lasting impression before I've even performed any magic. So if you want to stand out, next time you meet someone new, focus on getting to know them before you start talking about yourself. So tip number 2 is to realize that people don't care about what you say, they care about how you make them feel. In fact, most of the time, individuals tend to forget the specifics of what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. Like if you went to a party a few weeks ago and I asked you, did you have a good time? You'd probably be like, yeah, I had a really good time. But if I said to you, well, what did you talk about? It'd be much harder for you to actually remember. And that's because emotions are what stay with us. So what people remember about you is how you make them feel and just the general vibe that you give off. Are you positive and inspiring and someone they want to be around, or is that not the kind of vibe you give? And as we just mentioned, one of the best ways to give off this kind of vibe is to be genuinely interested in other people, because it just makes them feel good about themselves. And then that feeling is what people associate with you. And this is one of the reasons why magic is such a fantastic art form, because it's all about making people feel something, whether it's a sense of wonder, a sense of joy, a sense of astonishment. They don't necessarily remember what you said, but they remember how the trick made them feel months and even years later. But more on that later. The point with tip number 2 is to create a meaningful connection by prioritizing how you make others feel. So the next secret to impressing anyone you meet is to become good at storytelling. Now, I know we've just mentioned how we want to let the other person talk about their interests and their hobbies and stuff, but obviously you can't just sit there in total silence whilst they do all the talking. So when it does come to sharing your own opinions on things, then being able to tell a captivating story is a total game changer, and it can truly elevate your presence and leave a lasting impression on everyone that you meet, whether it's in your personal life, your career, or even in something like magic. And And it's funny because speaking of magic, when I do a trick, I spend about 80% of my time telling stories, cracking jokes, and entertaining the audience, with the actual trick only taking up about 20%. And in my opinion, what separates an average magician from an astonishing one, and even maybe an average person from an intriguing one, is how good they are at entertaining the audience and telling stories. So here's a clip of me performing magic at a little event a few days ago. The whole thing's about 15 minutes long, but I spend most of the time just talking to my audience, telling them stories and making them laugh.
It's called showing off.
And it goes the same beyond magic. I'm sure you all know someone who's able to just sit down and tell stories that people just want to listen to. And the awesome part is that storytelling is a skill that can and should be learned. I mean, I wasn't naturally great at it myself, but through lots of performances, I've definitely got much better. So the next question is, all right, well, how do you become a better storyteller? I could make a full video dedicated to just storytelling if you guys like, so please let me know if this is something you want down in the description. But my main bit of advice is to actually practice telling stories. So like with all my magic and stuff, I literally write out the scripts and then learn them and then sit in front of a mirror and just say them back to myself. And this actually allows me to perfect my delivery and timing and the structure of each narrative so that when I tell people the story, it really works well. Now I know that's very, very brief, but the point here is to actually work on your stories. Take the time to think about them and craft them with precision so that when you're actually out with people, you know exactly what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, so you can deliver it with confidence. So tip number 4 is to be more than material possessions. I think a lot of people seek out things like fast cars and expensive fancy clothes, or even the latest technology, to try and come across as interesting and impressive. And it's kind of like this idea that once I drive that car or have this phone, then I'll be super fascinating. And yeah, I'll admit it, I've definitely fallen into this trap. Always chasing things like the latest iPhone or a super pricey magic trick or even something like an overpriced coat. And you know, I bought these things because I thought it would give me a sense of importance and make me seem impressive. The thing is, these items don't actually make you impressive, they just make you someone who owns something that is impressive. And once the novelty of whatever that thing is wears off, you're just back to being the same old person. And what really changed it for me was actually doing this exercise. I got a piece of paper and I wrote down all the people that I find most inspiring and really look up to, and I guess the people that I find most impressive in this world. And when I then wrote down why I found them impressive, it was very rarely because of the car that they drove or the clothes that they wore. Rather, it was the skills that they had, their personality traits, and their character. Those were the things that truly left an impression on me. So if you want to be someone that's impressive, remember that it's your character that matters most, not the things that you buy. So overall, you should really be focusing on developing yourself, learning new skills, like magic maybe, and doing things that truly make a difference to you and your character. And just to be clear, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever go out and buy material goods. Of course you should, but you should really just question why you're getting them. And a really good question to ask is, if nobody knew that I was buying X, would I still want it? And that will really help you determine if you're buying it because you genuinely need it or you're just trying to get it to impress others. Okay, so tip number 5 is to learn a unique skill or hobby. Now obviously this one's on the list because I'm a magician, but trust me, developing a unique hobby or skill can make you way more interesting and really set you apart from the crowd. And if I think back to school or even university, the people I found most interesting and impressive were just the ones that did something that they were passionate about. Maybe they were good at photography or drama or sports or even playing just a musical instrument. And even today, meeting people who are just passionate individuals with a special skill or hobby gets me excited. So for me, obviously, magic is the best example of this. I mean, I've just come back from 9 months of traveling around the world, and magic was pretty much my superpower. So when you meet new people, you normally go through all the usual questions like, what's your name? What do you do? Blah, 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 blah. And most people just answer them normally. But as soon as I mention that I do magic or I'm a magician, their curiosity just spikes and goes through the roof. And it really just allowed me to meet so many incredible people from all walks of life, because I ended up performing to entire hostels and getting to stay there for free because I showed everyone magic. Or I went into little villages and I showed the people there who didn't even speak English magic as well, and basically just allowed me to meet lots of incredible people, all because I had a really unique skill that people found impressive. Now, you don't have to suddenly pick up magic to make this work. There are so many different things you can explore, like photography, painting, traveling, dancing, wine tasting, becoming well-read, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. The key is just to expose yourself to more unique ideas and hobbies and skills, and when the time comes, you bring them up and let people know about your passions, and that will really set you apart from the rest of the crowd. So tip number 5 is don't try and fake being interesting. Instead, become interesting by picking up a unique skill or hobby. So that's it for this video. Just remember, it's all about making genuine connections and being passionate about who you are and what you do. So go out there, be yourself, and leave a lasting impression on everyone you meet.